I was raised Christian fundamentalist and have only been an atheist for about 2.5 years. Hopefully, my regular viewers all know that by now. I believed it all fervently. I wasn't the kid that always had their doubts and asked too many questions in Sunday school and got kicked out for it. I was a leader in my church youth group. I prayed constantly, I studied the Bible diligently, and I evangelized to any of my acquaintances who weren't Christian. Most of all, I had a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Or so I thought. A major part of my Christian life was personally experiencing and interacting with God. Some, but not all atheists I know, say they've never experienced anything they felt was supernatural even when they were very religious. But I have, and I want to take you through the story of a deeply meaningful experience I had, tell you what it meant to me then, and tell you what it means to me now. I was 17 and applying to colleges. My 18th birthday was coming up, so I went in for my last checkup with my doctor at the Children's Hospital before I transferred to a primary care doctor for adults. During the checkup, my doctor noticed irregularities in my heartbeat. I quickly followed up with a cardiologist and received some bad news. The cardiologist suspected that I had a condition that could shorten my life, even making me vulnerable to a potentially fatal heart attack as a teenager. Just a few months before, my friend's otherwise healthy teenage little brother died of the condition that I was suspected to have, so I was afraid for my life. Shortly after learning of my condition, I got accepted into my first choice of universities, but with further testing only confirming the doctor's suspicions, I wondered whether I'd even live to finish college. I was confused. Why would God allow me into my top choice of schools only to let me die at a young age? I felt I had no hope but through my relationship with Christ, so I turned to him in prayer. Right away, I felt that he told me to have patience. He had a plan. So I did, and a couple months later, just before I was to move off to college, I finally received some good news. My cardiologist performed more invasive but conclusive testing and found that I only had a mild heart arrhythmia. I left the hospital ecstatic and said a quick thanks to God on the way home. A couple weeks later, I finally started college. At the start of my second semester, though, I began to feel very convicted. I hadn't given God enough credit for allowing me good enough health to go to school. That was wrong, and I felt God urging me to meet with him. Now, I want to really take you into my head here. There's a simple guitar piece which I wrote during another spiritual experience that I think relays my feelings at the time, so I've decided to use it here as a backing track. It was late, and everyone in my dorm had settled down. I closed the door, sat at the foot of my bed, and opened my Bible to Proverbs. I didn't know if I'd actually read it, but that was always the book I read from in times that I needed wisdom, and just having it open became a source of comfort for me. I bowed my head, closed my eyes, and silently asked God to guide me through my meeting with him. I stayed still and silent for several minutes, clearing my head of distractions. I was content in the silence, but something began stirring in the room. I spoke to God, thanking him and acknowledging that it was only through him that I was able to be where I was. My conviction only grew stronger. There was more I needed to bring to him. See, ever since my misdiagnosis, I had become closed off to others. The stress of medical issues combined with the stress of my first semester of college had made me cold. I was too callous to grow as a person, and it was keeping me from the life that God wanted for me. I finally admitted that out loud, and suddenly, I wasn't alone in the room. Something intense swept over me. God's presence was there and was overcome with indescribable peace. Time became imperceptible, and my sense of self was stripped away. I was meeting with God. No words were needed to communicate what would happen from there. I was to become more open, more vulnerable, more compassionate. God would allow me to feel emotion like I never had before for a few days from that point on, and then I'd choose whether or not I wanted to keep that gift from him or not. I asked to remain in that moment for a while, and God allowed it. I stayed there still, staring at the words printed on the first page of Proverbs in my Bible. Who knows how long that went on for? It could have been minutes, it could have been hours. But at some point, it ended, leaving me feeling totally at peace. I fell asleep next to my open Bible and slept perfectly until morning. Over the next few days, I did feel incredible compassion for others. My emotional calluses wore away, and I began to understand those more emotional than I typically was. I obviously asked God to let me stay that way, and he allowed me to keep a portion of what I'd been feeling for good. It was an incredible way to start a semester, and I was so grateful to have been allowed to go through it all. As unique or life-changing as that experience sounds, it's far from the only one I've ever had. I actually had to choose between several experiences I could tell you guys about for this video. Growing up how I did, those moments were definitely special, but they weren't uncommon. The presence of God was something I felt pretty often. Not always in huge miraculous ways, but also in still small ways that felt like the comfort of a close friend. I mean, I had a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. If I hadn't felt like he was there with me sometimes, then I wouldn't have ever called it a relationship. To run through just a few other spiritual experiences I've had, I asked God for wisdom like King Solomon's at 9 years old, and he told me it would come through him as I got older. As a preteen, I rededicated my life to Christ, and I felt him at the church altar with me. At church camp, I felt God in the room with me more than I could feel people there. In high school, I intensively studied apologetics so I could effectively share the gospel with my acquaintances who were unsaved, and God met me multiple times in that process. During college, I even had experiences much more intense than the one I described here. The point is, I've had a lot of very powerful personal experiences with God in my life. So why then am I an atheist? The answer is, it's a result of my view of personal experience. See, a few years ago, a lot of people I knew started using and selling essential oils. A lot of them claimed that the oils cured medical issues of theirs, like chronic migraines, heart disease, and even cancer, and that oils could do the same for other people. I found that there was no research showing that essential oils could do any of those things, and those selling them actually admitted as much. They believed oils could do these miraculous things based solely on their personal experiences. I was studying scientific methodology at that time, and I learned that reliable scientific medical studies always test one factor at a time by putting certain controls in place which allow researchers to rule out the placebo effect, the effects of other medications, dietary and exercise changes, etc. That way they really know what caused the effects they observe. I realized that people claiming they know what essential oils do based on their personal experience didn't have a leg to stand on. What they experienced could have been, and more likely was, effects of factors they didn't account for. That realization led me to stand pretty firmly against essential oils and a lot of other types of alternative medicine. After all, they were using them as medicine and making them a huge part of their lives based on nothing but unreliable personal experiences. And then it hit me. My personal experiences with God had strengthened my faith, but were they any more reliable than others' personal experiences with essential oils? Probably not. I went on to learn that psychologists have been studying religious experiences for over a century. They've found that experiences of the supernatural had certain triggers like music, large crowds, extended exercise, meditative states, sensory deprivation, drugs, sleep, food, and water deprivation, and much, much more. Scientists have even tracked brain activity during supernatural experiences and have seen predictable patterns, many of which can even be replicated with electrical and chemical stimulation. After that, I learned about the religious experiences of those of other faiths. Apparently, people of basically every religion on the planet have reported experiences very similar to my own. Personally, sensing and interacting specifically with one's own deity is a universal experience regardless of the deity that one worships. People even have unique religion-specific experiences in religions which actively contradict other faiths. For instance, Pentecostals experience baptism of the Holy Spirit, or speaking in tongues. Meanwhile, Pentecostalism claims to be the only true religion which allows for actual connection to God. Many Muslims, however, experience a connection to Allah during prayer in which they're bathed in a green light, green being a sacred color in Islam. Meanwhile, Islam claims to be the only true religion which allows for actual connection to God. Because of the exclusive nature of these religions, they can't both be right. One or both of them must be mistaken about the origins of their own divine experiences. At a certain point, after learning all of this for myself, I ran through the implications of what I discovered. Maybe my experiences were real, but I hadn't controlled for any other influences on me, so I couldn't be sure that what I felt was a result of something supernatural. Maybe they were real, but they happened in meditative states, which are known to cause brain activity which scientists can both predict and replicate by natural means. Maybe they were real, but people of religions which contradicted my own had experienced things just as real and religion-specific as I had. Maybe they were real, but I had no valid reason to think they were supernatural, and every reason to think they were natural. I could no longer be honest with myself in saying that I had good reason to believe that my experiences, however powerful, were anything divine. It was dishonest to continue to think that my experiences were special, while all others in different religions were most likely just a product of the mind. While that realization disappointed me in a way, it also taught me that all I need to create amazing, self-transcending experiences is my brain. In fact, I've had experiences like that since becoming an atheist, and they were just as powerful, all while being completely naturalistic. In my deconversion, I lost nothing and gained a greater understanding of the human condition than I had previously. Honestly, I'm glad I experienced what I did as a Christian so that I can know exactly what religious people mean when they talk about supernatural experiences. And if nothing else, I love that when Christians ask me if I've ever experienced what it's like to have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, I can honestly say yes. Thanks for watching. I've been Drew of Genetically Modified Skeptic. This video was inspired by a conversation I had with my Christian friend Craig Reed. Craig is a great guy, and we both really enjoyed that talk. It's pretty long, but if you want to listen to it, there's a link in the description. We started talking about my religious experiences about 40 minutes in or so. As always, praise be unto Adam, my top patron and personal Lord and Savior, for making this video possible. Go ahead and subscribe, check out my Patreon, follow me on Twitter and Facebook at GMSkeptic, and until next time, stay skeptical.